Hello and welcome. This is Coach Luca from the Reflective Coach podcast, and within this episode I'm going to be talking about creating a match day environment that's beneficial to young players and the environment that's around them. Having much experience in coaching youngsters and working across young players for many years, one thing I've always ensured is behind the barrier. So creating a barrier which parents and spectators have to be behind, and making sure they're on the opposite side to the coaches, or that the coaches are on the opposite side to their spectators. I've coached against many coaches within games, league games, friendlies, tournaments, etc. that stand on the same line as the parents, even their own parents, and have their parents behind them. For me, this is detrimental, because how can you have honest conversations with players when they're coming off the pitch or you're making substitutions and you need to give that honest feedback and those parents are stood there? Parents can't always take that feedback on board, and being involved in a game, especially when their own child is playing, can create an environment of emotion, and it doesn't always necessarily mean that they're going to regulate it. Creating that barrier, especially away from yourselves on the opposite side of the pitch, allows the player to come into a comfort zone with his teammates and yourself as a coach, coming off and being able to have those honest conversations and being able to come away from their parents and those spectators that may be putting pressure on them from the opposite side. So it creates that comfort blanket for a player in terms of that own environment which they can come off on your side with you just as a coach, and it creates an environment which allows you to have those honest conversations, especially having discussions with your assistant coaches, especially about your next change. If those parents are stood on the same side as you, or you're stood on the same side as them, and you're talking to your assistant coach about changes, parents may interpret this the wrong way, or may have this kind of information which is available to themselves, knowing what the change is going to be next. And if this is consistent, parents will start to look at opportunities to pick off your verbal communication with your assistant coach, pick up and reference on what you've said. They may be picking up on areas such as, oh, well, you subbed him last week, you're subbing him again this week, I've heard your conversations. So it's detrimental to have the parents on the same side as you. So always ensure that the parents are on the opposite side, and always ensure a side just for coaches where you can have those honest conversations, especially if you're coaching minis football. So for example, anyone from under 6s to under 12s and maybe under 16s, where you can coach from the same side as the opposition and make those conclusive decisions collectively, allowing those free kicks and moments within a game to be awarded, creating that harmonious understanding so that the environment can be beneficial to the young players that you have, and that is one that is enjoyable for them, allowing the game to be free-flowing, but picking up on any necessary areas, such as when fouls are given within a game, that allows learning an opportunity for the game to be realistic to what they see on TV. Now, one of the other moments that and reasons I don't like parents on the same side as coaches is when a player comes off, and I've witnessed this over the last few weeks, and their parent is stood there. It creates a comfort zone, a comfort blanket. Now, I've already said about a comfort zone where they can have one with their coach and their teammates, and that they can come off away from their parents and that pressure. That is completely fine. But when it's creating a comfort blanket and a comfort zone with the parents there, it becomes too natural. It becomes too relatable to allow them to approach their parents and just, especially as a young player, cuddle into them and just be stood there. Now, there could be questions asked over this, especially when you're coaching young players and they need those parents there. And they may need to go over and just have that cuddle, especially if they lack that resilience or they lack that emotional understanding or intelligence, especially because of their age or emotional maturity. But this is just a case of, if you're under 10, under 12, under 10, 11, 12, and you got the parents still stood there, and there's players coming off and they're going straight to their parents, they're standing there, you can't have honest conversations with those players, because they've gone across straight to their parents and they're stood there with their parents. Not only that, they may be losing concentration on the game, as well as the fact that the parent could be putting too much pressure on them and picking up straight away on what they need to do. As that young player, they're thinking and processing about what they've done, their teammates, the pressure from their parents and spectators, the pressure from match day itself, and everything taken on board from the coach within that game. They also have emotions from within the game of how it's been flowing, as well as other areas that could be affecting them throughout. So having the parents on the same side where they go and receive that feedback is detrimental. But if they're coming off and they're standing next to their parents and it's becoming too much of a comfort blanket where the coach can't have those honest conversations or talk about or give feedback to a player as soon as they come off or talk to them about their performance, which is relatable to those exact moments, and as to why they've come off, then it's going to cause serious issues. I've seen players over the last few weeks, especially within a new group, come straight off and stand next to their parents, away from the coach, away from teammates, and suddenly it creates a little bit of divide within the team. Now, although the parents may be spurring on and being there for the team, but once players are going off with different pockets of parents, it becomes much harder to make those necessary changes and quick transitions. It always creates a little bit of divide because you have certain parents which have different personality types that may not all click within that group, and then when players are stood with their parents and they're giving feedback in terms of those kids speaking to their parents, the feedback always isn't great. So what we're looking for is honest conversations where we can just be with our players and give them feedback. Now, being honest from experiences, especially from what I've witnessed, observed, and been in and around over grassroots coaching over the last 6.5 years or so, is when you have certain pockets of parents with their own personalities and you can have little clicks, because this is an honest observation of what I've seen and what does happen. When a player comes off and doesn't always have the greatest relationship with his teammate, once he's going and standing away from his teammate, it breaks down those relationships in areas that could be addressed to support those players and create that harmony. But additionally, if a player is going away and they don't have a great relationship with their teammate and they're giving feedback to their parent that isn't so positive about their teammate, such as, oh, he wasn't passing me the ball, or he didn't play so well, which forced me to play bad, or he's, isolated me out the team, or I hate him because of this. And that's honest language from a young player, because they don't know how to regulate their emotion or their communication or language at times, and they're just going to be open and honest because a kid says it how they see it. And that can create a bit of a negative influence and impact at times, because suddenly the parent is chipping away in their own mindset of the reaction from their child, and they're not always in a position to regulate it themselves. And obviously, being emotionally attached to their child, they're going to look at and protect their child, which is one of the first instincts of a parent in terms of how they react. So it doesn't always have that good balance that you can address and have those open conversations there and then at that time. It can create a negative influence and a bit of a divide at times, especially on one side. If you're aware of it as a coach and it's ongoing, then obviously you can have those honest conversations between parents, realign the group, and address those friendship, partnerships, relationships, and look at how those relationships can be built within the team, especially between the peers, and whether there's any team building opportunities to be had. However, just creating that environment which players can come away just on the side with their coaches, that allows them to reflect or just be with their teammates on the side, whether watching the game, passing a ball, or just having that conversation as soon as they come off, is always beneficial to them. So a player may be emotionally attached to the game, or their emotions haven't been regulated within their own mind, and their feelings and other outcomes such as their anger and other emotions are being expressed. If they come off on the side and they're just there talking with their mates and then suddenly they're having a bit of a laugh, then it creates that positive matchday environment, and an environment for them where they know they can come off, they can relax and just be with their teammates and just think about anything else other than the game within that moment. Because especially when you have young players, you either want them concentrating on the game, which is very important, so that they're observing and learning all the time visually, or whether they're having those honest conversations with their teammates, having that verbal communication and relating to their learning and performance on the pitch and spurring on their teammates within that moment. There are times where you can allow moments and relationships to happen on the side where players can come off because it's been a frustrating game for them. They're not as happy with their performance. The team isn't performing as well as what they're used to. Having that opportunity to just come off on the side and just have a laugh can be really beneficial to that player going back on the pitch and being really happy, or the player leaving happy at the end of that match day. You can't win everything, and if you are winning everything, then what challenges are you putting in place? But that's a conversation for a different time. But if you're not winning and then you've got players coming off and they're continuously upset or they're leaving angry and upset continuously after a match day, especially if you're going through a bad period or your team is struggling because of the league that you're in, sometimes just having a laugh with the players and knowing that the grassroots experience or just playing can just be a laugh or something that they can look back fondly with on when they're older just means that they can look back and go, do you know what? My coach gave it his all. I had plenty of training, I played games, I had kits, I went on tours, I had presentations, I had tournaments, I had festivals, I played with my mates, I met some great people, we'd done some travelling, and I had all those experiences, especially when they're at an older age looking back. If they can say that from when they're a youngster, and they can realise that as a youngster as well at times, because their maturity and game understanding and just understanding the situations themselves, etc., because of their education and involvement within the game, etc., then it can just mean that you're uplifting the players so they can go away and just forget about the game, or they can just switch off about it. And this all comes down to personality types, which I've addressed on in previous episodes. Your personality types can have the players who just want to be there for a laugh, the players who want to be there and win it all, and the players who are there because they're pushed into that area. Now, there's many other personality types within football which we could come down to, and we're going to address more further within the podcast. However, in terms of this, when we're looking at these personality types and the players who are just there for a laugh, coming off after losing, they're quite happy to forget about the game. They're quite happy to go away and just go, do you know what, I played a game of football this morning, and then go and play on their PlayStation for the rest of the day, or go out and do something different. And it doesn't really impact them for the rest of the week. Whereas you have those match day winners and those game winners and those who are ready to succeed, ready to learn, ready to lead, and who want to win regardless of anything, they're going to continuously reflect on their performance and the team's performance. They're always going to address why have we lost and why are we not winning. And they're the ones who could lead you at times and get you out of those situations. However, because of those different personality types, it's very important to be aware of those different personalities and how you can address them and uplift some of your players, especially who leave following either a bad game or a bad run, which can be very beneficial. So just creating that environment on the side where you can just be with your players, you can have a laugh, you can change the mindset and try and uplift them, try and overcome those emotional barriers, try and overcome those feelings or try to address those feelings within a positive manner and channel it into their performance, then creating that environment is really important. I can't stress the importance of having the parents on the opposite side, the coaches. Now, I've already addressed some of the main factors and issues around this. I've also addressed some of the positives around it. Now, for me, it just gives a breath of fresh air as a coach on your one side, and you can make free-flowing decisions without feeling the pressure of parents and other key stakeholders stood behind you. It doesn't make you feel that you have to be under pressure to bring so-and-so's son on or so-and-so's daughter on because they're stood behind you, and then you're feeling the pressure to bring them on or to make changes because of your own emotions. Changes can be predetermined and pre-planned, especially at a younger age when you're not competitive and you're looking at minutes and you want to get players on and players developing. And also, as time goes along, you're playing competitive football, you may pre-plan as part of your tactical plan, but obviously within how a game free flows, you can't always predict the outcomes of a game. No matter how much you prepare, you will have to make tactical changes as necessary and determined by the outcomes and the moments of that game. But the match day environment is very important. Allowing a player to come straight in and allow them to be comfortable in how they approach match day is very important. So everything from their team arrival to a team warm-up to how they transition into their dynamic and static stretching in terms of how they're moving on and off the ball in a warm-up, whether you're warming up the goalkeepers, your type of team talk, how you're lining the team up, what the team sheet's going to look like, how the team lines up, what the opposition have done, how early the player's been, how late a player has been, whether they've turned up on time or there's been other impacts, whether they weren't at training the day before or their last training session, or they may have woken up late that moment or they've had a late night. There's plenty of factors that can filter into the match day environment which can really change that environment and that dynamic, especially in terms of each player and how it could affect the team. So it's very important as a coach to be aware of all of these factors and how you address and maintain a consistent matchday environment that can allow any young player who may, and any player for that fact, who may have experienced these factors within the last 24 hours or ongoing, etc., that they may bring to a match day environment. And where they're comfortable, they know where they can come in straight with their coach, straight in with their teammates. They know what they're doing for a warm up. They know how to transition. It can become player led, and then everything goes within the game as it happens itself. But that's when you create a positive match day environment, which can allow them to overcome any factors which have arisen, whether that morning or the night before, etc. So, you have an environment which is comfortable for the players within match day, but when it comes to environments which can be comfortable within training, allow players to express themselves, allow them to enjoy training, allow them to maximise on their 4 key pillars, allow them to really enjoy their football, can be really beneficial. And that was part of a conversation I had with a coach once, and it was part of something that I was reading previously, having the balance between comfortable and challenging environments. And I've always been taught, make sure that the environment's always challenging, make sure that you're always trying to push the players. And I'm absolutely up for this in my own coaching philosophy and my own coaching outlook, is always push the players. Now, I may make it comfortable, but at times where we revert to something that we've already previously done and the players know that they're going to do well, and it can really bring in new challenges within what you want to do within that training exercise itself, but they're comfortable doing it and they can still be challenged. Now, creating comfortable environments can be really beneficial, especially on a back run of a negative period where you may be losing, training isn't great, you may have some unhappy players, which you're going to experience at times at all levels. And having those comfortable environments can be really beneficial just to readdress and realign, that football can be fun. It's there to be enjoyed. You're never going to get these years back. And all those personalities, so those who are going to go on and play beyond 16, beyond 18 and play for the rest of their lives, etc. Those who are pushed for the highest peaks of football, and for those who will drop out because they're happy to have dropped out at a certain age, and the football is being completed for them because their mates have moved on, and seniors football isn't for them, like what happened with myself, for example. Just going back and creating those comfortable environments is really important at times. And then there's a balance between that challenging environment and a comfortable environment. And a comfortable environment can be really positive, especially on a match day, especially when games don't always go the way that we plan, or have an outlook in terms of how it should go towards how we believe it should be. And that's why it's really important to create this space, allowing players to just have some pressure, especially during a game where there's so many emotions and so much going on all the time. What coaches seem to forget is that a player is trying to make their own decisions. They're thinking a million miles an hour. They've got the adrenaline pumping. They're trying to perform. They're trying to remember everything that they need to do and been told to do. They're trying to react to something that's happened within the game itself, whether a tackle or they've lost the ball or they're going to recover. Their teammates are onto them, and they're trying to regulate all this at one time, and then their parents or other stakeholders, etc., on the side are constantly giving feedback or trying to get involved in the game when they shouldn't be, and they should just be spurring it on, because they're not regulating that either, and they want their child to perform one way. And what you've got to think of, for this child to have a million different thoughts themselves, and then they're hearing a million different things within their own ears, it becomes very difficult for them to manage their own emotions and their performance on that match day. So having that environment where they can just come off, sit on the bench, they can just have a conversation with their coach, or just sit there with their mates, or just sit there and watch the game by themselves because they're happy to, just on the side, then it's really, really important. For me, make sure that the parents and stakeholders are always on the opposite side of yourself as a coach. It's beneficial to you as a coach. It's beneficial to your team. It's beneficial to your players. It's beneficial to the opposition. There's many key outcomes, and I've never enjoyed having parents on the same side as me, and I never ever will. And I will never really enjoy parents watching a training session as such, because I just want to be with the players and just work and allow them just to enjoy their football. And I don't think parents should be watching and putting as much pressure on their child, by just being there in training. It's nice that parents are happy to be supportive and watch their child in training, and that they'll be there and that they're going to be there with them. And that's always a good experience for the child. And there's having that fine balance of when they should come and watch, when they want to come watch, when you're happy for them too. But then when it's too much all the time. They're constantly at training as if they're assessing, they're constantly pushing, they're constantly looking at what their child is doing within training. Just becomes really an unenjoyable environment in terms of coaching itself. And if this transitions and links up with match day where the parents are stood on the same side, then it becomes a real negative environment, and especially for you as a coach, because you're feeling that pressure of all the time. But this is just a quick little snapshot in terms of creating a positive match day environment and having a barrier line, which is really important. A lot of key considerations. And I don't want to labour over the points consistently and too much, to the point where is continuously relating back to what we've already said. I've already recapped consistently throughout my previous points, but this is just a snapshot of an experience that I've had in terms of my own coaching, from what I'm observing around me and what I think is beneficial to all new coaches, and all coaches that are out there that don't currently do this, in terms of creating that positive matchday environment with the behind the line or barrier, creating that environment for the young player. Obviously, a lot of considerations, but I'd like to thank you just for this small little snapshot and insight. You can reach out to me on Twitter and LinkedIn. It's Coach Luca, the Reflective Coach Podcast. I'm always look for working with other coaches and those involved in the game, sports, etc., networking, speaking on other people's podcasts, other people coming on mine, talking about key contemporary issues, key topics, giving feedback, looking to develop the outlook on coaching altogether within itself. But I really appreciate your time listening to this, and I hope you find some benefits. And again, always up to have comments and just some feedback, etc. But this is Coach Luca, the Reflective Coach Podcast. I'm thanking you for listening, and I really appreciate your time as always.